welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today we are doing a currently reading update to chat about what I've been reading in May so far. Also, I am experimenting a little bit with my lighting, relying a little bit more on natural light than I normally do. So I'm not sure if this video is going to be like too dark or too bright. We're gonna find out. You know, be forgiving of odd lighting. Anyways, what has been going on with my reading in May? So far in May, I've been just, my reading's been a little chaotic, I feel like, because I keep picking things up and putting things down. Although at this point, I feel like that's just what my reading like is all the time. So maybe that's nothing of note. But I just haven't really been sure what kind of reading mood I was in. So I've kind of been trying a bunch of different things. But I do have two books that I am currently reading that I am enjoying. First, let's mention the last thing that I completed was Solitaire by Alice Oseman. That was kind of like at the tail end of just like reading a couple more of her books from after watching Heartstopper, the Netflix adaptation, then rereading the graphic novels, and then I read a couple of other books that are kind of in her like YA contemporary universe, and the last one that I read was Solitaire, which I felt pretty in the middle about. It wasn't one that like left a strong impression. There are things about it that I enjoyed, and I liked the main character. So the main character in Solitaire is Tori Spring, I think is her last name. She's the older sister of Charlie, who's one of the main characters in Heartstopper. I gave it 3 stars. I think it's one that like it was fine, but I don't think that I'll really like remember it, you know? Anyway, now on to the books that I am currently reading. So one of them is Crossings by Alex Landrigan. This is kind of, it's like literary fiction, maybe kind of historical fiction. It's a book about books, which is one that I got this because it sounded interesting, but then I kind of was like, am I ever going to get around to reading this? I don't know. But I just suddenly decided I was in the mood to read this book, and I'm glad that I started it because I think it really is like exactly what I was in the mood to read. Anyway, to explain what this is about, this starts out in like the preface being about a man who is a bookbinder, and he has like a patroness who has him bind all kinds of books in like fancy ways. She gives him a manuscript, but says like, you can bind this book on the condition that you never read this manuscript, which he agrees to. Some stuff happens so that he ends up deciding that the deal is off and that he can just read the manuscript if he wants to, which he does, and then like binds it. That's all just like the preface of the story. The rest of the book is that manuscript. It is like what he has bound. So the manuscript is 3 short stories, which there are 2 ways to read this book. The first is what they call the conventional way, which is just to read it cover to cover. So you're just reading each individual short story, in which case they are like very loosely connected. Like one of the short stories is referenced in another one as to like, oh yes, this is a book that exists. But they're not very much connected if you read them in that way. And they also are kind of like different genres. One of them is kind of like a historical fiction, like a World War II historical fiction, which usually I don't really enjoy World War II historical fiction, but you know, I'm going with it because it's part of this like larger story. One of them is more like a fantasy about these people who live on an island, and they have some kind of like magical powers. And the third one, I'm not really sure how to describe what it is. I haven't read much of it yet. Anyway, so there's the conventional way to read it, and then there's what they call the Baroness sequence, which kind of has you skipping around between all 3 stories, and that ends up weaving all 3 stories together into one more cohesive story. So I'm going with the Baroness sequence because that just sounds more interesting. I've seen a couple of reviews that say that that is like the best way to read this. I also just personally don't always love short stories, and so I don't think I would really enjoy it reading them as individual short stories, and I will probably be enjoying this much more like reading it as one story that weaves together 3 stories. And so far, I think that strategy is working out for me because I am liking it. I can't really track my reading progress easily because since you're like skipping around, you can't really track like page count. So at the beginning, I've marked the page where they kind of have the whole Baroness sequence like laid out here. So this is like the order in which like you're supposed to skip to different page numbers. Throughout the book, at the end of each section, it also has like a little page number when you end a chapter, and so that tells you like where to go next. So you don't always have to be referring back to this page, but I have been using this page to kind of track my progress so that even if I'm not counting exact page numbers, I know that there are about 20 chapters and that I have currently read like 8 of them. So I'm not quite halfway through, but getting close. So that's just to kind of help me keep track of like essentially where I am in the book. But yeah, so I have been enjoying this. I don't think I haven't been like loving it. It's not one that I've been like, this is the most amazing thing. But I think that I'm enjoying it in a way that like there's something about the feel of the book that exactly like hits the spot for whatever reading mood I am in. So there's like a type of enjoyment that I'm getting just from it being like the exact vibe that I wanted. So I'm really liking it, and I am liking seeing how each of these stories are woven together. The other book that I am currently reading is my audiobook, which is Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the 3rd and final book in the Devabad trilogy, and I am really loving this. And I was expecting to because I loved the second book. The second book had a bit of a slow start, but then I ended up really loving it. This, I feel like maybe a little bit of the same, a little bit of a slow start, but now I am over halfway through. I am right about here. And I'm at the like I don't know where, but at some point I like reached a point in this where I was like, this is the only thing I care about. I don't want to think about anything else. I just want to read this book. I have been just enjoying it so much. There are 3 perspectives that we're following in this one of which I am not as into. So like there are 2 perspectives that are together, and so they are kind of like one piece of the story, which I'm like very into and loving that part, and that's kind of the part that I'm like obsessed with. And then there's like this other storyline that I'm like, yeah, I get why it's important to the plot, but also I just like don't care about this character at all or like anything that they're doing. But I still am interested in it because it is necessary for the plot, and it's affecting the other part of the storyline that I'm liking, and I'm just like loving other parts of the book so much that can't drag it down really for me. So I'm having a great time reading this. All right, so those are the things that I am currently reading, not counting the other books that I have like picked up and put down. So like maybe I'm technically kind of reading, but not really. These are the only ones that I'm like really actively reading and I'm planning to finish soon. Okay, then for what I'm thinking I'm going to read next, because I have been so just chaotically mood reading recently, I really don't know, but I have a couple of ideas of things that I might be reading. So a few things that I've been thinking about. One is Fires of the Faithful by Naomi Kritzer. I hauled this pretty recently, and I don't know, the other day I just was like feeling like maybe I'm in the mood for this, but I was like, I need to finish a book, at least one of the books that I'm currently reading before reading this. But this has been kind of on my mind. It is a fantasy about this girl who's at like a music conservatory, and I think there's something about like a magical song that has appeared, and I don't know how it's affecting them, but like somehow that sets off a plot. I don't really know too much about this, but I kind of been wanting to read it recently. Another one that I've been considering, but I'm not sure when I'm going to get to it, is Fool's Assassin by Robin Hobb. So this is the first book in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, the last trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings. This whole trilogy is on my like TBR for the year. I really want to finish the trilogy this year so that I can finish the whole Realm of the Elderlings series this year. So I need to just like finally start. I always struggle a little bit with like starting Hobb's books. I usually end up enjoying them once I get started, but for whatever reason I have a really hard time getting myself to just like start the book. So I would like to actually start this. I need to start this early, and I need to start this series early enough in the year that I can finish it by the end, just because I also tend to have like large gaps of time. I take breaks between books, so I need to give myself enough time in order to like accommodate my procrastination between books. So I do want to get to this soon, but I also don't know if I'm actually going to. So those are the physical books that I'm considering right now. In terms of audiobooks, one of the things that I'm thinking about also is that there's a book that is a collection of short stories set in the Daevabad world that's like following, I don't really know exactly what they're about, but they're just, you know, more short stories kind of expanding in the world of Daevabad. I don't know if it's like before the events of the trilogy, during, or after, or maybe a mix of all three. I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure that you can get the audiobook on Audible. I think the physical book doesn't technically come out until like October or something, but the audiobook is available. So I might listen to the audiobook, since I've been listening to this whole trilogy as audiobooks anyway. I'm going to be listening to the audiobook for the short stories, and I have a feeling that when I finish this, I might just like be on a reading high from this and want to just have, you know, more of anything in this world. So that might be happening for my next audiobook. Anyway, so that is what I have been reading, what I'm currently reading, what I'm thinking of reading next. I'd love to know what you're currently reading, and you know, how you've been feeling about it. But thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye.